Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari. This is Great Big History Podcast, History 101, Episode 10, Assyria and the Professionalization of Terror. Assyria, the Assyrian Empire, was born in trauma. So this is the first people we're talking about after the Bronze Age collapse. So who are they? They're nobodies. They live up in nowhere. They're up on the frontier of the northern Tigris. Remember how when we talked about Mesopotamia, there was Sumer in the south where all the major cities were. Then there was Babylonia, Akkad in the middle, where Babylon was located and became the new focal point. And that the farther north, the farther up the rivers you went, the more frontier it was. Well, the Assyrians are up on that frontier. And remember how the Euphrates was the more important of the rivers? The Assyrians are located on the other river, the Tigris. So they're in the poorest part of Mesopotamia on the poorest river. So they're not important. Not compared to Babylon. Much less compared to Egypt, which we'll talk about in the future. They're not important. So how are they traumatized? What's their trauma? Well, their trauma comes from the Bronze Age collapse. If you're on the video and you're looking at the maps, the big red dot up on the northern Tigris is where Assyria is located, where they start. But remember what the Bronze Age collapse is. It's all of these nomads on the move, and nomads are bumping into other nomads, and those nomads are bumping into other settled people, and settled people are bumping into other settled people. Well, if you're a people on the move looking for a good homeland, and you need money and supplies and stuff, where are you going to go? If you have ships, you can go to Egypt. And Greek Viking barbarians do. Greek and Philistine Viking barbarians do. But if you're in the land of the Hittites, that is completely overwhelmed and breaks up into lots of little kingdoms. If you're on the move in the Caucasus, the mountains that separate modern Russia and the Ukraine from the Middle East, the place to go is Babylon. It has the stuff. It's got the money. Well, to get there, you have to go down the rivers, which means you have to go right through the land of the Assyrians. And so, wave after wave after wave of nomadic peoples, of settled people, homeless settled people on the move, just come through. And what do? Well, they kill men, they rape women, they kidnap kids, they steal all the cows, they steal the horses, they light fire to the houses. And so the Assyrians, who don't have much ability to protect themselves from these marauding waves, are completely traumatized. So what's the result? The result is we will never let this happen to us again. We are never going to let this happen to us again. So how? How do you do this? And the answer the Assyrians come up with is to build an army that cannot lose. And if you look at the video and you're a Doctor Who fan, you know they even have Daleks. They even build super weapons. And what does a Dalek say? Exterminate. Well, that's the Assyrians. You're going to build an army that can't lose. Well, how? How do you build an army that can't lose? You have to build a society that can build the soldier that can be put into an army that can't lose. So you have to militarize your society. Now, we've seen this from time to time. It's going to be the Spartans. It's going to be in some ways, the Nazis are going to do this. We're going to see this in history, that the answer to we can't lose is to completely change the society, to create the kind of citizen who is professional at war. Well, that raises a problem. You should already know what that problem is. That problem is, who's going to make the food? Who's going to be the farmer? Like, if this was such an easy solution, more people would have done it earlier. No one's done this up to this point. No settled people has taken all of their people, all of their men, and put them into the army and trained them as soldiers, professional soldiers. The Assyrians are the first real professional army in the world. Sargon had mercenaries. He hired people who sold their training, who sold their ability. That's not a professionalized army. That's a mercenary army. They fought for pay, and they trained themselves in order to get that skill. What the Assyrians are doing is taking their farmers and making them into soldiers, so that every person in the society, every man in the society is essentially a soldier. Well, people still have to make stuff. You need horseshoes, right? You need rakes and hoes and farming implements. You need food. You have to have farmers. So what's the solution? Slavery. Slavery is the solution. You have to enslave other people. You have to force other people to work for you, to make goods for you, to make food for you. And that will be the answer the Nazis will use, and that will be the answer the Spartans will use. They will create slave labor to make stuff for them so they can put more people, more men into the army. So what's the result of this? Well, it's unending war, because you're constantly having to fight new people to pay for the old war, to steal more stuff, to take more stuff, to pay your citizens to continue to be in the army. Because you still have to feed them, you still have to pay them, even if you're not fighting. Well, where's that money coming from? Now you constantly have to generate more. So the Assyrians, who didn't want to be traumatized anymore, have created a system where they will have to constantly either traumatize other people or their society will collapse. Professor, doesn't this cause another problem? Yes, it does. I'm glad you saw it. People don't like being slaves. So how are you going to force them into slavery? Well, you're going to have to gain legitimacy. People are going to have to accept your right to tell them what to do, which means your ability to tell them to give you stuff, to work for you and not for themselves. So how do they gain legitimacy? Well, they invent terrorism. They invent what we would call state-sponsored terrorism. This isn't the terrorism of the nomads. This is a settled society choosing to threaten violence against other people if they do not cooperate. This is terrorism. Now, terrorism is different from war. It's different from violence. It's different. And what it requires is two parts: violence, or the credible threat of violence, plus propaganda. People have to know you can do it. See, before 9/11 happens, very few people took Osama bin Laden seriously. He was talking about attacking the United States in 92, 93. By 96, Al-Qaeda was starting to attack places. You get the bombings in Kenya and Uganda. You get the bombing of the USS Cole. But the people who could have been at a conference for counterterrorism of Al-Qaeda in 1998, they would have all known each other. It might have been 100 people. There were other places of violence and bigger organizations to worry about. No one took them seriously. Then 9/11 happens, and that is the propaganda coup of all terrorism, because the entire world watched it happen. And now, on September 12th, everyone was terrified of Osama bin Laden. Every time Osama bin Laden put out an audio tape, "I'm going to fart in your general direction," America freaked out. I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but we used to have like threat levels. It's green, it's orange, it's red, right? To like terrify. We were terrifying ourselves, right? And I'm a New Yorker, so I had been in those buildings. So I was traumatized by that. My brother was in downtown New York. I had friends in those buildings. I had been in them a dozen times or more. Walked by them, God, hundreds of times. You know, been through the subway station. I don't know. So, but everybody had seen it happen. And so all of a sudden now Al-Qaeda could get you. They had a credible threat of violence. And that's how terrorism works. They have to threaten violence, but it has to be a credible threat. You have to take it seriously. After 9/11, we took Al-Qaeda's threats seriously. And you need to know what they want. That's the propaganda part. So the violence part, well, what the Assyrians do is create an army that can do things nobody else can do. And that is called combined arms. It is a modern method of warfare. That's the important part to understand. The Assyrians were fighting in a modern way. Our army works and trains all the time to perfect combined arms, which is all the military types working together simultaneously. So for the Assyrians, that's the infantry plus the archers plus the chariots, combining their advantages and offsetting their disadvantages. What does that equal? That equals the complete destruction of your enemy. Yep. So let's show you how it works. We have the king of Elam, who we're going to meet later, versus the Assyrians. And Elam has all of his infantry. Infantry. Well, this is going to be a simplistic little demonstration, but gets the point across. Meanwhile, the Assyrians have the three difference: infantry, archers, and chariots, right? So how does the battle progress? Stage 1, the chariots come in. Now, the chariots are not tanks. They can't battle it out. They're more like jet fighters. They come in, shoot their arrows, scare people, disrupt things, get people moving. That's their idea. If you are a chariot and you stop moving to slug it out, you're dead. They're supposed to move at 25 miles an hour, hit hard, hit fast, scare people, right? And be difficult, because they're moving at 25 miles an hour, be difficult to hit. So what's an infantry going to do? This is stage 1B. Well, some will run for their lives, right? The other infantry will group up, right? They'll make a nice big ball. They'll make a nice big circle. They'll put their spears out, and the chariots will be forced to go around them. And the infantry is fairly safe. The only guys in any danger are the guys on the periphery of that circle, and they got shields up. All right. So now we're at a stalemate. The chariots can go around in a circle for a while, right? But they're not going to hurt Elam's infantry. But the Elam's infantry can't fight the chariots nor anybody else. Okay. Well, this is how now combined arms works. You have this situation. That's a stalemate. The chariots can't defeat the infantry on their own. The infantry can't defeat the chariots on their own. Well, here comes the Assyrian archers. To the archers, that circle is a giant bullseye. It's easy to hit. You don't even have to aim. You just shoot. And what happens? This. Thousands of arrows coming at the individual. Well, Professor, you could just put your shield above your head. Yeah, maybe. If not everybody around you is doing that and you have enough room. But if you're in the front line, if you put your shield up on your head, that chariot can now shoot you in the face. And so when death rains from you from the sky, when death comes from above, what do? You run. You get out. So what happens is that circle breaks. because death is falling on them from the sky. So you run away. So it breaks apart. It runs in all the different directions. And that's when the infantry comes in. Because the archers can't fight that infantry. But the Assyrian infantry now moves forward as a phalanx, as like the riot squad, as a SWAT team, shoulder to shoulder with shields and a spear. Meanwhile, the chariots are running around everywhere, scaring everybody, picking people off, but in come the infantry with their spear and their shield to do the killing. And what is the result? The result is mass death. The total destruction of the army, which is totally new. Nobody fought like this before. The goal was to make people run away before. Okay, nomads might murder all the men, right? But that was nomadic warfare. It was different. The Assyrians are bringing the same concept of nomadic warfare to settled people. Now remember, settled people want the land and they need the farmers as slaves. Murdering them doesn't help you. The Assyrians are willing to murder them because they don't want anyone to ever fight back again. And so nobody could do this. Nobody could do this. No one else could fight like the Assyrians can fight. Not the Babylonians, not the Egyptians. There's nobody who can do this because they don't have a militarized society. They have an elite class of charioteers, and then they have some infantry dudes they hired, some farmers they gave a sword to. Well, those guys get crushed. You have the total destruction of the enemy. The goal is no longer to win the battle. It is to destroy the will of your enemy to fight. And this is totally new. And so we see this violence. Sargon II destroys Israel, the northern kingdom of the Hebrews, in 725 BCE, and commits a genocide. Wipes them out. The 10 lost tribes of Israel, which when we talk about the Hebrews, we'll talk about. But basically, Sargon destroyed 85%, give or take, of people who were Hebrews. Way more than what Hitler ever could have accomplished. Now, Hitler might have wanted to do this. He wanted to do this. I shouldn't say might. He did want to do this, but he could only dream of doing what Sargon II and Sennacherib actually did in terms of mass destruction of Hebrews. So Sargon II just destroys the Israelite army, then picks up the people and carts them off, and they disappear. They're assimilated into Assyrian society, into slave society. They're gone. They're just gone. Within 100 years, they just don't exist anymore. They've been assimilated. Their kids are marrying Assyrian girls. Their grandkids are speaking Assyrian and dressing like Assyrians, and they're gone. And Sennacherib, in 689 BC, sacks Babylon, destroys it, burns it to the ground. In fact, we have what Sennacherib wrote about that. And carvings, art. Remember propaganda. Well, if you can't read, here, we'll draw a picture for you. In fact, their picture of carting off Babylonian gods. If you're taking a look at the video, there's a Babylonian god of a man's head on a winged horse, right? A winged Pegasus. And this is the Assyrians using slaves to cart off the Babylonian gods. That's to prove your gods suck. Your gods are weak, right? If we could cart off your images of your gods, that means your gods can't stop us from doing it, which means they're weak. Well, if you go into the British Museum and the Louvre, that same statue is there. That same statue is in the British Museum. So 3,000 years later, the Brits were carting off Babylonian gods just like the Assyrians did. But you could go and see it. So Sennacherib, on the sack of Babylon, I opened Babylon's treasure house, gold, silver, precious stones. Remember, Babylon is the richest city in the world. Way richer than Assyria is. Gold, silver, precious stones of every kind, goods and property without limit, heavy tribute. His harem, his is the king of Babylon. Harem is his combination of sex girls, princesses, hangers-on, the court, the female part of the court. His courtiers, his officials, singers, male and female, all of his artisans, as many as there were, the servants of his palace I brought out. I counted as spoil, meaning I could take them as slaves. In the might of Asher, my lord. So there's a bit of religion, right? Here's the god Asher. 75 of his strong walled cities and 420 small cities. His allies of their environs I surrounded, I conquered. Their spoil I carried off. Which means he carried off their people, their important stuff. He sacked Babylon of everything it was worth and carted it back to Assyria. Sennacherib, who nearly destroyed Jerusalem in 707 in fighting Elam, at the command of the god Asher, the great lord, I rushed upon the enemy like the approach of a hurricane, right? This is not wimpy, what he's doing. I put them to rout, right? I turned them back. So he broke their lines. They're running away. I transfixed the troops of the enemy with javelins and arrows. Transfix means I stuck them to the earth. They could not move. I hit them with so many arrows, they were stuck in the earth. Habandundasha, the commander of the chief-in-chief of the king of Elam, together with his nobles, I cut their throats like sheep. Now remember, that sounds scary, but do you know what that looks like? Probably not. The people of their day would know what that looks like, because remember, they're farmers. They sacrifice sheep and goats and pigs to eat meat for sacrifice. So when he says, I cut their throats like sheep, not only is he saying, I murdered them, right? I treated them like animals. I had them in my power. He's also giving an image that the people of the time would have understood how terrifying, how terrible that is. He's murdering these people like they're a sacrifice to the gods, like sheep. My prancing steeds, trained to harness, plunged into their welling blood as into a river, meaning their welling blood was, meaning they were still alive, right? Welling is, it's still pumping out of them. So he ran over people who were still alive. The wheels of my battle chariot were besplattered with blood and filth, filth meaning the insides of their intestines. I filled the plain with corpses of their warriors like herbage, meaning I killed so many of them and left them in the field. They looked like vegetables. They looked like a farm, which, if you go back to our image of Antietam, if you look in the back, yeah. Like up close, you see, oh, those are people. But the farther you look back, you go, oh, those are, what is that? What are those mounds up there? Well, on a farm, it looks like herbage. But in reality, it's people. So back. All right, so that's the violence part. What about the propaganda part? Nineveh and the Great Library. The propaganda part is a trauma and humiliation. How is a city and how is a library trauma and humiliation for people? Well, let's start with the city, Nineveh, the capital city. First, it's a great city built by slaves. It's not natural like Babylon is. Babylon's a trade city, right? People come to it. It's where the rivers come closest to each other. It's a natural place. It's why there's been a major city there all the time. Assyria is the middle of nowhere. There's no reason to have a great city up there. But here's the problem. Babylon is the standard. If you are a Mesopotamian people, Babylon is awesome. Even if you don't like it like the Hebrews, even if you're wary of it, the Hebrews are going to build a Mesopotamian city, Jerusalem. You had to build one. The Phoenicians will have Tyre. Right? You have Ur and Uruk. and Nippur. You had to have a city with walls, great palaces, great temples. You had to have a Babylon because Babylon was the standard. It's like if you want to be a great city, what do you have to have today? You have to have skyscrapers. You have to have something that's 100 stories tall. And then put an observation deck on the top. Chicago has it. New York has it. Now Philly has to have it. So we have what now? A 60-story building. All right, not bad. It's not New York. But it's got an observation deck at the top. You have to have skyscrapers. So non-Western countries do the same thing. Oh, we want to prove our city is awesome? We're going to build a skyscraper. So if you want to prove in the ancient Mesopotamian world you are a significant people, you have to have a city. You have to have a big city. The Assyrians didn't have one. The Assyrians weren't important. So now they have to build one. And so they build Nineveh. But they're not builders. They're warriors. They're soldiers. So they're going to use slaves to do it. And so it's a terrorist Babylon. We're going to build this great city because we made you do it. That's the trauma. We're going to cart you up. We're going to take you from your home. We're going to cart you up. We're going to make you work for us for nothing. Why? Because we can. So the violence is inherent in the slavery, and the building of this city is terrorism. It's a trauma to people. You think your father's coming back from building Nineveh? No, he ain't coming back. You're never going to see him again. You have to pay your tribute. You have to pay that food. You have to pay that money to the Assyrians. You have to go to Nineveh and be reminded. Because guess what the Assyrians are going to do? They're going to build monuments to their victories. So where are you going to pay your tribute to me? Right at the monument, memorializing my father's defeat of your father. So even the memorials remind you of your defeat. The memorials in Nineveh are terrorism to the people who were conquered. It's a reminder of what I did to you. Well, what about the Great Library? How is a library terrorism? Well, again, do the Assyrians sound like intellectual people who spend a lot of time reading and writing? No. So where did all the books in the Great Library come from? They came from other people. They stole other person's knowledge. And now here's the part you may not remember about a library. You have to ask permission to take out a book. You have to get your books, especially like if you're a kid and you go into the adult section. You can't just walk out with a book. You got to go up to the desk. And you got to go to that nice person, that nice lady at the front, and you have to hand over the book. And then that person looks at that book, looks at you, and decides whether or not they're going to allow you to take that book out. So if you've ever been a kid in the adult section, you go up and you go, whoa, look at this cover. I want to see this. And you give them the book. And the person at the front goes, yeah, I'm not giving this to you. Where's your mom? Well, say go to the library and go get a book. And I want that one. Well, no, I'm not letting you have that. No. Right? So it's a humiliation. It's about power. It's about control. Hi, it took us 2 months to get up to Nineveh. Can we please read the books from our snow god? Because winter is coming. Oh, your snow god. Took 2 months to get up here, huh? Yeah, it turns out we're closed to the spring. Yeah, you'll just have to come back later. Assyrians, our snow god won't be happy. Yeah, well, he should have thought about that before losing in battle. Sorry, Good luck.
Okay. So there's nothing we could do?
Well, you could try to make an army and win a battle, but that's not going to happen now, is it? Goodbye. Right? The library is used as terrorism. It's a humiliation. It is about keeping people from their own stuff. So how do people feel about this? Well, that's the problem, right? The disadvantage of the Assyrian methodology, the disadvantage of terrorism is everybody hates you. Hates you. Not dislikes you, not wants to defeat you, not wants to change. Hates you. In my classes, I usually do an example of like, who's upset that Osama bin Laden got shot 4 times in the face? And nobody ever raises their hands, but I do. Why? Because I am upset. Because Osama bin Laden bombed my city, right? He was responsible for this. And so, what was his death? His death was seeing a flash of light he barely understood, and then he was dead. What do I want to do? What I would like is us to have tied him to a chair in Times Square and let everyone in New York and in the city and in New Jersey, in the northern suburbs, and everybody who worked or lived in the area to be able to walk up and punch him in the face. This is emotional. It's not rational. It is hate. Hate. But if you're the Assyrians, who cares? You have a homeostatic imperial system. You're too tough. If they revolt, you destroy them like you did to Israel or you did to Babylon. Everything's great because you're tougher than everybody else. So a homeostatic system is one that's self-regulating. You're too tough. No one revolts. You get what you want. Hey, life goes on. And this is how it will go for about 100 years. 200 years. Well, the problem with a homeostatic system is it's homeostatic until something within it changes. Or something changes, either within it or outside of it. Like your car engine, right? Every day you get up and you turn on your car. Vroom, 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 and it works, right? Well, one day you go, and it doesn't work. Well, there's 2 ways it doesn't work. One is something inside the engine doesn't work. The battery is dead, right? A belt is broken. The other is outside. Your ex is really upset that you made out with their cousin, and so has taken an axe, a pickaxe, to the hood of your car, and has put all kinds of ventilation holes in it, smashing up your engine. That is an outside effect, right? So I'm going to tell you, it's not an internal effect. I just kind of told you that. The Assyrians are too tough. If you revolt, something bad happens to you. That situation is not going to change. Even with a rebuilt, revitalized Babylon, no one's strong enough to fight the Assyrians. So then the change has to come from outside. And that's exactly what happens. What happens is nomadic horse people enter the Middle East. The end of Assyria, which was a 300-year empire, dies very quickly. The nomadic horse people, the Medes and the Persians, enter the Middle East. They cross the Caucasus Mountains. They enter the Iranian plateau, and they're looking for stuff. They're nomadic peoples looking for stuff. Now, what happens? Well, the Assyrians are going to go fight them and to maintain their empire, but everybody else in the empire who hates the Assyrians, which is everybody, is going to revolt. And this is going to be led by a rebuilt Babylon. Remember, it's a trade hub. It makes money. So it's Oprah Babylon is like Oprah. You get an army, and you get an army, and you get weapons, and you get horses, because they have the money. And remember, if you're the Assyrians, you're like, well, why would you let Babylon rebuild itself? It's like, because you can tax it for more money. And you're pretty sure you beat them once, you could beat them again. But now, here come the nomadic horse people like, hey, who has all this? We want your stuff. And everyone says, we don't have any. The Assyrians have it all, and we'll help you get it back.
Well, okay, little buckaroos. Let's go.
So everybody revolts. And you get the Battle of Nineveh in 612. Which is the best I can do in describing it is the Battle of Minas Tirith in the Lord of the Rings third movie. But if the good guys are on the outside and the bad guys are on the inside. Rather than the bad guys are on the outside and the good guys are on the inside, which is the way the movie is. It's not like that in reality. It's the good guys, the Babylonians, Hebrews, Mesopotamians, Sumerians, Phoenicians are on the outside, laying siege to Nineveh. And what's the result? The complete destruction of the Assyrians. They will break into that city and go street by street by street, murdering all the Assyrians. Why? Because they hate them. That's what the Assyrians did to them, and it is vengeance. And that is our second image on the right, if you're watching the video. It is the massacre of the Assyrians. The king will commit suicide in the middle of the battle. The entire Nineveh will be depopulated. The people will be picked up, divided up, and enslaved and carted off, like the Assyrians did. Xenophon, which is with an X, Xenophon, the Greek military historian / soldier of fortune, will encounter Nineveh while marching with a Greek army into the Persian Empire in his book, The Anabasis. And it's a city of ghosts. It's abandoned. It's a city of giants. Who could have lived in such a place? To a Greek, he's never seen any city like this before. He hasn't seen Babylon yet. Nineveh's still far to the north. He hasn't seen Persepolis. So he doesn't know what a imperial capital looks like, but he sees a city and it's abandoned. It's a city of ghosts and of giants. Giants must have built this city. Humans could not have built it. It's too big. And so you get the complete destruction of the Assyrians. So the people of the Middle East are traumatized. They don't want to be ruled again. They were traumatized by the Assyrians. So they will fight everybody in order to not be ruled by somebody again, which means more war. Because the Medes are like, well, we are looking for a homeland. And the Persians are our little cousins. They'll do what we say. The Babylonians are like, no one's ever ruling us again. Egypt's like, dude, we don't want to be invaded either. We got invaded, so we want to control all the access points into Egypt, which means controlling Gaza, means controlling Jerusalem, means controlling the Phoenicians, means controlling the Levant. So you get more war. Egypt owns the Nile River. Lots of food, lots of money. Babylon dominates Mesopotamia, the two big rivers. The Medes dominate the Iranian plateau and Bactria. Bactria is basically Afghanistan today, and it's access to the Indian trade routes and the nomadic soldiers of the Central Asia. Like, you could always hire some horse troops from the nomadic horse people. Better you hire them than they invade you, right? And the Medes are nomadic horse peoples who are now starting to settle down. So they're cousins to those people. So they can easily connect with them, right? And then there's Lydia, which is Anatolia. It's basically the successor to the Hittites. It's Turkey. It's Asia Minor. It's based in Western Asia Minor, Anatolia, as opposed to Eastern, like the Hittites were. But it's basically the successor to the Hittites. And there's going to be 75 years of war. And what is the result of this? The Persian Empire. Whoa, wait, what? Huh? Wait, the Persia? The little piece in the southeastern part of the Median part of that entire, they're going to control everything? They're going to, Professor, why? Well, that's what we're going to do next in our Persian episode. So take care. Be safe. Don't be an Assyrian. Take care. Be safe. Stay healthy.